lecture hall inside the Zinthari Annex of the Galactic Behavioral Institute was nothing short of architectural reverence. Its ceiling arched like the ribcage of a great celestial beast, glowing softly with ambient starlight diffused through crystalline panels. Each species was seated in tiered semicircles that descended toward a central arena, where a six-eyed, four-armed Archean professor named Vrolax loomed behind a transorganic podium. His skin was a pale lavender, pulsating faintly with veins that shifted color with his mood. In that moment, the color was an inquisitive green, a signal of challenge. The hall was filled with murmurs and posturing. Young alien cadets, bright minds from every quadrant of the known systems, fidgeted in their seats, awaiting the next psychological case study. Some clicked mandibles in anticipation, some vibrated in silent hums, and others communicated by scent trails or phosphorescent pulses. Yet among them all sat one being that made no sound, emitted no light, no scent, and no psychic signal. She simply sat there, quiet, contained, still. Her name was Mira Lane, and she was the only human in that cohort. Today, Vrolax boomed in a voice that vibrated bone and metal alike. We explore the apex phenomenon. He swept his upper left arm toward the center of the chamber. A hologram appeared, spinning models of predators from across the galaxy. Each was brutal, beautiful, and deadly. Serrated fangs, neurotoxic spines, plasma-based digestion. Apex creatures evolved through millennia to dominate their food chains. Young scholars, Vrolax intoned. Each planet has its champion, its ultimate survivor, the apex predator. Now let us consider Earth, this violent, unpredictable death world. Tell me, what is the apex predator of this blue anomaly? Mira didn't flinch. Her shoulders remained square, her eyes calm. She was used to these moments, used to the attention, the condescension, the subtle challenge masked as curiosity. Vrolax's head tilted slightly, a movement not of aggression but intrigue. "Cadet Lane," he said, his voice heavy with a ceremonial drawl, "since you hail from this world of oceans and tempests, would you enlighten us?" Dozens of alien eyes turned to her, compound, luminescent, stalked, and singular. Some twitched in impatience, others waited to mock. A few, notably the Riverian twins who could smell chemical fear, leaned forward slightly, searching for the scent. Mira stood up slowly. She didn't adjust her uniform. She didn't clear her throat or posture for dominance. She simply walked to the edge of her row and looked directly at the hologram of the Earth ecosystem rotating above the floor. She examined the image for a second, as if considering her words. Then, with an expression that was neither smug nor defiant, she raised her right hand and pointed at herself. The silence struck the room like a thunderclap. For a moment, there was only stillness. Then came the buzz of disbelief. The Valaxarian male laughed so hard that his pheromone glands triggered involuntary spasms in the three cadets beside him. One of the feathered Elunari whispered something under her breath and shook her beaked head. The Threxian, muscular, armored, born from a world of acid lakes and hypergravity, sneered openly. Mira stood quietly. She didn't respond. She didn't flinch. She just kept her hand where it was, still pointing at herself. "Forgive me," Vrolax said, choosing his words with care, "but I believe there is a misunderstanding. Perhaps you thought I meant the dominant species. I meant apex predator, the one that hunts, that kills, that fears nothing." "I heard you," she said, her voice calm, clear, and disturbingly steady. "And you assert that you are the apex predator of Earth?" She lowered her hand. "Yes." More laughter, this time from multiple corners of the room. Cadets chuckled in their native ways, clicks, flashes, vibrations, and scent bursts. Even some of the more advanced species, the ones known for cerebral intelligence rather than brute strength, looked bemused. "And your justification?" Vrolax asked. She looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of her peers without blinking. "We're not apex by tooth or claw. We didn't win because we're fast or strong or venomous. We're apex because we wanted to be, because we chose to be. Earth didn't hand us the crown. We carved it, burned it, and bled for it." The Valaxorian male rose from his seat, his claws extended and iridescent with mock challenge. You expect us to believe willpower makes one predator? He scoffed. We were engineered to dominate our biosphere. Our ancestors slaughtered sky serpents and lava worms with their bare hands. And that's impressive, Mira said. But you were born with that. We weren't. We learned to kill with rocks, then with fire, then with machines. And we haven't stopped learning. The Elinari tilted her head, her feathers shimmering with curiosity. And what do you hunt, human? You kill for food, yes? For territory? For defense? Mira smiled faintly. We kill for those reasons. But we also kill for anger, for envy, for revenge, for boredom, for curiosity, sometimes just to see if we can. The room grew still again. We're not apex because we're the strongest, she said. We're apex because we refuse to be anything else. Vrolax tapped one of his fingers against the podium, each click echoing through the silence. An interesting theory, he murmured, but theories are wind without proof. Would you be willing, Cadet Lane, to demonstrate this dominance you claim? She nodded once. Gladly. He tilted his massive head. Then, tomorrow, we will hold an apex simulation. Each species will face a biome designed to strip away your natural advantages. No weapons, no allies, no assistance. Survive or don't. A chorus of hisses and growls of anticipation filled the room. The Rivarian twins hissed something to each other in their glottal tongue. The Threxian cracked his neck and bared his serrated teeth. Mira didn't react. She simply returned to her seat and folded her hands in her lap. Vrolax closed the lesson with a flick of his claw. The hologram dissolved. The cadets filed out, some chuckling, some whispering, a few stealing glances at Mira like she had just declared herself queen of a kingdom no one else could see. She remained seated for a few more minutes, staring at the empty arena floor. As she rose and began walking toward the exit, her reflection passed over the polished surface of the floor. A reflection not of a monster, nor a beast, but of a girl who had been born on a planet where survival was never guaranteed, where everything that breathed could kill you, and where humans, against all odds, had learned not just to endure, but to dominate. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. By the time Mira stepped into the cadet mess chamber that evening, the air inside had changed. Not with temperature or scent, but with an undercurrent, something unspoken, taut and electric. Conversations halted for a second as she entered, then resumed at a slightly higher pitch, just enough to be heard. She didn't acknowledge it. She had no need to. Her presence alone stirred enough discomfort. She crossed the room without hesitation, selected a simple ration pack from the dispensary wall, and sat at the table farthest from the others. Not because she feared confrontation, but because she liked to see the room. It was always easier to study others when they thought you were isolating yourself. Across the chamber, a muscular Threxian male, Jurak, his name tag gleamed, slammed his tray down and bared his teeth. His carapace gleamed black with crimson streaks, polished with pride. A predator species bred in extreme gravity and molded by constant territorial warfare. The Threxians were walking tanks with claws like serrated daggers. "So that's your plan?" he growled, addressing no one in particular but facing her fully. "You'll just sit there and declare yourself dominant? Where's your fangs, little apex?" Mira didn't look up. She was breaking a nutrient strip in half with calculated movements, almost methodical in their restraint. "You can smell fear, right?" she asked, still without raising her gaze. His mandibles twitched. "I can taste it before it forms." "Good," she said, finally locking eyes with him. "Then you already know the answer." The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It came from multiple corners of the room, each cadet emboldened by the safety of numbers. A phosphorescent Zarnari female blinked with a violet shimmer, her voice a soft hum that vibrated the tableware. "Emotionally charged language doesn't qualify as evidence, human. Intelligence is not predation." Mira chewed slowly, watching her with the cool detachment of a scientist studying bacteria. Another cadet leaned forward, Sivir, an Okari with feathered limbs and a face like a hawk's skull. He tilted his head in a mock expression of pity. "You humans always think you're special because your world tried to kill you. Our sun devours half our continent every orbital cycle. You don't see us writing poetry about it." Mira stood up, not abruptly, but with the fluid grace of someone who wasn't concerned about escalation. "You think we romanticize survival?" she asked, her voice still level. "You misunderstand. Earth doesn't just try to kill us, it succeeds constantly. Floods, famine, disease, predators, volcanoes, storms, each one stronger than the last. And yet we thrived. Not because we adapted, because we refused to be erased. Jura growled low in his throat. Spare us the drama. We evolved to kill with purpose. Your species kills out of madness. That's not apex. That's a flaw. Is it? She asked, almost softly. Then why are you still arguing with me? The room quieted, not from fear, but from recognition. She had forced them to question something fundamental, and none of them liked the feeling. Vrolax entered without warning, his massive form making the entry sensors buzz in protest. His 6 eyes scanned the room instantly. I see the discussion has migrated to less formal ground, he said, his voice echoing off the reflective wall panels. No one answered. Excellent, he continued. Let us make this useful then. Since words stir little but noise among apexes, we will accelerate tomorrow's event. The simulation begins in 6 hours. Prepare yourselves accordingly. No tech, no assistive gear. Your natural physiology versus environment. Just as your ancestors faced their world, gasps rippled across the room. Mira said nothing. She already knew he would do this. Archeans believed in compression, pressure to reveal truth, like turning coal into gemstone. Jurok grinned so wide his jaw plates clicked. Finally, he said, eyes fixed on her. We'll see if apexes bleed like prey. Mira smiled, but not with amusement. It was that same unreadable expression she wore when she had first raised her hand to point at herself. It was the expression that said, I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to show you. The next hour passed in controlled frenzy. Cadets returned to their barracks to hydrate, stretch, and mentally prepare. Some meditated, others rehearsed combat stances or reviewed survival protocols encoded in their genetics. Mira, meanwhile, sat in silence in her quarters, a dimly lit room with only a bed, a hydration capsule, and a monitor embedded in the wall. She didn't move. Her eyes remained half-lidded, her breath slow, shallow. Inside, her mind wasn't empty. It was calculating, evaluating terrain probabilities, behavioral patterns, probable weaknesses in alien cadets based on their limb ratios, speed, and oxygen requirements. She didn't need tech to survive. She needed instincts sharpened not by biology, but by history. Generations of war, betrayal, invention, extinction, and resilience. 6 hours later, the cadets gathered in the launch chamber, each species housed in a transparent pod, suspended over the simulation grid. A biome crafted by the Institute to mimic no world in particular and all worlds in spirit. Ravines, fog, dense overgrowth, unpredictable weather systems, and nocturnal predator drones that mimicked high-tier threats from across multiple sectors. Dujur cracked his knuckles against the metal of his pod, snarling. The Zarnari female whispered into her palm, likely activating her second cortex for strategic clarity. Sivir flexed his wings, his eyes locked forward in hunter's focus. Mira simply waited, hands at her sides, heartbeat slow. Above them, Vrolax's voice filled the chamber like thunder. You enter not to win, but to survive. No assistance will come. The first to withdraw will be catalogued accordingly. The last one standing will be acknowledged. A low hum built beneath their feet. Begin, Vrolax said, and with that, the pods dropped. The chamber floor split into 100 shifting plates, each cadet landing in a separate quadrant, isolated by walls of stone and vines that rearranged themselves at random. Wind howled, a simulated storm ignited overhead. The test had begun. Mira hit the ground hard, rolling once before landing in a crouch. The terrain was damp, the soil laced with bioreactive fungus. In the distance, she could hear one of the larger predators being released, something mechanical, with synthetic musculature designed to mirror instincts rather than programming. She breathed once, deeply. No tools, no fire, no shelter, only instinct. And that was fine, because no one in this test was born prepared for survival. But she wasn't born to be prey. She was born human. The air in Mira's quadrant was thick with moisture and riddled with unfamiliar scents. Decay, metallic sap, acidic pollen. The ground beneath her boots squelched with every step, the soil alive with microbial movement. She crouched low, eyes scanning the canopy overhead. Leaves the size of satellite dishes shimmered faintly in the dark, and some twitched toward movement as if half-sentient. Light filtered down through the mist in trembling columns, but it did nothing to reveal the full layout. This wasn't a space to see, it was a space to feel. She moved with deliberate silence, keeping her weight balanced on the balls of her feet. The other cadets had been dropped into similar biomes, some into sand-blasted gulches, others into frozen crevasses or carnivorous marshlands. But the conditions here were dynamic, ever-changing. The vines above shifted like nervous fingers, and distant growls reverberated through the underbrush. She paused beside a split tree trunk and touched the bark. It was warm. Too warm. A faint tremor ran through it, and she realized it wasn't a tree at all. It was some form of organic funnel, likely part of the simulation's artificial predator system. Sensors, maybe. She backed away slowly, pulling her scent with her. In this place, movement was just one danger. The forest was listening. A scream echoed from the west. Mira couldn't tell who it belonged to. It ended too quickly. She didn't stop. She headed downhill, toward the faintest sound of trickling water. The only constants in survival were gravity and need. Water collected where terrain dipped, and where water pooled. Other cadets would eventually surface, if not in body, then in error. Mira reached a shallow basin, its center filled with translucent green algae and slow-moving creatures that resembled bloated leeches with ridged backs. She didn't drink. Instead, she examined the perimeter. Her eyes locked onto a jagged stone lodged under a moss-covered root. Not ideal, but sharp on one edge and curved just enough to be held. She gripped it, turned it once in her palm, and tucked it under her sleeve. A branch cracked behind her. Her hand didn't twitch. She stepped left, letting her boot land on softer soil. Then she turned quickly and dropped low, stone in hand. A predator burst from the shadows, quadrupedal metallic hide, glowing sensors instead of eyes. A simulation drone, shaped like a hybrid of a feline and a crocodilian. It moved without hesitation, and its jaws clicked as it lunged. Mira rolled beneath it and slashed at its flank. Sparks flared, not enough to disable it, but enough to stagger its gait. As it turned, she leapt onto its back, driving the stone into a weak seam just behind its front leg, where armor met synthetic ligament. It shrieked, twisted, and bucked her off into the mud. She landed hard, her shoulder screamed in protest. The drone pounced again. This time she rolled sideways into the water, submerging herself completely. The drone hesitated. Its sensors didn't penetrate below the surface. Mira waited, lungs burning as its footsteps circled the pond. 32 seconds later, it wandered off. She surfaced quietly, one eye above the waterline. Her fingers gripped a thick vine behind her, slick and firm. When she pulled herself onto land, she was soaked and shivering, but alive. One kill opportunity lost. But one predator survived her, not the other way around. That was Data. She moved again, this time uphill. The terrain darkened, less vegetation, more stone. As the trees thinned, she spotted claw marks in the dirt. Deep, wide, erratic. Not drone tracks. Not an animal either. She crouched beside them and brushed away debris. Riverian feet, digitigrade, sharp, rear talons. Someone had passed here recently. Fast, panicked. Then she heard it. Shallow, ragged breathing from above. Mira climbed with caution, staying low, using rocks for cover until she found the source. Riveran male. Bleeding from his upper shoulder, breath rapid. He was slumped against a ledge, both weapons missing, antennae twitching with unfocused urgency. He didn't see her until she was only 10 meters away. His head jerked up and his tongue flickered. You're not a healer, he rasped. No, she said. You're not dead, though. He grimaced, the scent of his blood pungent in the air. I was attacked. Jurak passed through here. Didn't even stop. Just left me. Why would he stop? She asked. The Riverian's eyes narrowed. Because we're supposed to be a team. She didn't reply. She scanned the area, then stepped past him. You just gonna leave me? He called out, anger rising. No, she said. I'm going to use you. He blinked, confused. She picked up a nearby branch, thick and broken on one end, and wedged it under a rock to form a makeshift lean-to over him. Then she scattered moss and nearby debris across the area. Stay still, she said. That wound won't kill you, but predators are going to follow the blood. If you panic, you die. The Varian looked stunned. You're helping me? I'm covering you, she corrected. Helping implies debt. Then she disappeared into the slope above, leaving him staring after her, mouth half open. By the time Mira reached the next ridge, the light above had shifted. A red aurora swirled through the sky, part of the simulation's artificial cycle to disorient cadets and shift time perception. She didn't care. She wasn't tracking hours. She was tracking survival patterns. She found 2 more bodies at the edge of a ravine. One Elyari, one Zarnari. Both unconscious but breathing. Poisoned, most likely. Judging by the bruise patterns, they had wandered into a trap zone. Bioluminescent spores clung to their faces. Mira didn't approach. She circled around. She wasn't in this to play medic. She was in this to observe. High ground gave her visibility. That was what she needed. From her perch on a boulder, she watched the clearing below, a wide basin surrounded by rising cliffs. In the middle stood Jurak. He was covered in scratches, but nothing serious. His arms were folded, his posture relaxed. A dead simulation drone lay at his feet, ripped in half. He was waiting. Mira crouched lower, watching. He wasn't hunting anymore. He was baiting. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't his natural behavior. Jurak didn't wait for prey. He chased it. He was trying to lure her. She shifted back into the trees, letting the canopy hide her. She knew his game now. He assumed she'd come down to confront him. He believed he had become the benchmark, that if she wanted to be acknowledged, she'd have to face him directly. She smiled faintly. Then she began setting traps. The night cycle inside the simulation wasn't real, but it felt real enough. The artificial sky had turned pitch black, save for streaks of electric blue flashing above like migrating storms. The only light on the forest floor came from the phosphorescent spores embedded in the tree trunks and the occasional flicker of predator drones still roaming the perimeter. Mira moved through the trees like a shadow. Her steps were silent, her breaths shallow, her heartbeat under complete control. She had mapped Zurak's pattern. He remained in the same clearing, his posture loose but calculated. He wanted to be seen, and that made him dangerous. Mira knew he was waiting for her, not out of confidence, but because he needed to be the last one standing after defeating her. For him, dominance was only proven in confrontation. For her, it never was. She had circled the area 3 times now, noting the blind spots and changes in wind direction. The clearing had 5 possible access points, and Jurak faced the 2 most obvious. The others were partially obscured by tree roots and thick brush. That was where she had begun her work. The traps weren't complex. Simple snares made from fibrous plant stems, sharpened stones buried in mud, pressure triggers made from curled leaves that would snap when stepped on. She knew none of it would kill him. That wasn't the point. The point was to remind him he didn't control the terrain. Mira returned to her vantage point on the ridge and crouched low, just beneath a twisted branch covered in bioluminescent fungi. Below, Jurak shifted for the first time in an hour. He sniffed the air and turned slightly, his attention drawn toward the north path. She had planted traces of her scent there, rubbed her wrist along the bark and left a broken twig in plain view. It was bait. He took it. He moved fast, much faster than his heavy frame would suggest. His strides crushed undergrowth as he pushed through the brush, claws at the ready. He took the baited path exactly as she hoped. The moment his weight pressed down on the moss-covered slope, the ground gave slightly, and the vine-laced snare she had woven snapped upward, wrapping around his shin and yanking his leg out from under him. Jurak snarled and crashed sideways into a log, the trap cutting into his thick hide. He clawed through it instantly, but the damage was done. His balance was compromised. He rose in a fury, bleeding from a shallow gash across his lower calf. He turned wildly, scanning the ridge. "Coward!" he bellowed into the trees. "You run, you hide, you set toys. This is your apex?" Mira didn't respond. She moved farther up the incline, reaching the second trigger. This one was positioned near a cluster of vine pods, fruiting sacs that exploded when disturbed. She hurled a stone through the trees, striking the trunk nearby. The vine pods burst, sending a blast of wet, sticky mist in every direction. Jurak ducked too late. The compound wasn't toxic, but it clung to everything and gave off a powerful scent. Something like burning citrus and metal, a predator's beacon. Now every simulation drone within 500 meters would home in on him. Jurak roared in frustration. He began slashing through the forest, cutting a direct path toward the ridge. Mira watched him come. She didn't run. She stood her ground and waited until she saw the white foam at the edges of his mouth, the narrowing of his pupils, the fury that had consumed his focus. Then she threw the second stone. It struck a thick knot of roots beneath a partially buried boulder. The vine bundle snapped free. The boulder, now unbalanced, rolled straight down the incline. Jurak looked up, too late. It slammed into him, knocking him clear off his feet and down into the shallow ravine below. When he hit the ground, he didn't get up immediately. Mira descended, stepping lightly across the slope until she reached the edge of the ravine. She stood over him, watching his chest rise and fall. He was still breathing, barely. He groaned and rolled onto his side, his claws scraping weakly at the dirt. "You didn't face me," he rasped. "You hid." She crouched beside him. "I was never here to prove anything to you." He spat blood. "Then why?" She leaned closer. "Because apex predators don't waste energy. They don't roar when they can stalk. They don't fight to be seen. They fight to survive. You're a performer, Zurak. I'm a reminder." He bared his teeth but said nothing more. His strength was spent. From behind the tree line, simulation drones began to emerge, attracted by the scent still clinging to his armor. They paused when they saw her standing over him. Their programming stalled for a moment, uncertain whether to engage. She raised her hand and pointed toward Zurich. Then she stepped back into the trees and disappeared. The screams didn't last long. Mira moved east, deeper into the terrain where no cadet had yet wandered. The map shifted in her mind, pathways she'd memorized, environmental hazards she now controlled. She was no longer reacting to the simulation, she was shaping it. By the time the artificial dawn began to glow through the canopy, she had gathered enough to understand her standing. At least 6 cadets were out, unconscious, injured, or already extracted by the overseers. She hadn't seen the Zarnari again. The Elinari was likely still incapacitated. The Rivarian might still be alive, but she had heard no sign of movement from his last known position. Her parents were about, at Summer's Land. She hadn't encountered Sivir yet. That meant he was watching too. He was quiet, careful. She respected that. He wouldn't fall into any of her traps easily. As the light increased, so did the frequency of drone patrols. The AI controlling them had likely adjusted aggression levels due to dwindling cadet activity. Mira used it to her advantage. She began marking predator patterns, following the gaps between their rotations. She passed through 5 zones without detection. In a grove of petrified trees, she found an odd silence. Then a shift. One she didn't expect. He emerged from behind a blackened trunk, his wings tight against his back, his talons curled. He didn't attack. He simply stood there, eyes narrowed. "I saw what you did," he said. Mira said nothing. "You baited him. You never intended to engage," he continued. "He was loud. You were efficient." She lowered her stance slightly, and he took a step forward. "I'm not interested in testing you. But I want to know, do you believe you've earned the title you claimed?" She tilted her head. "I don't need to believe it. I just need to walk out of here." His expression was unreadable. "Then walk," he said. He stepped aside and let her pass. She walked slowly, never turning her back fully until she was beyond the grove. Respect, not submission. It was enough. By the time she reached the center of the simulation grid, the place where the cadets were to be extracted when the trial ended, she was the only one visible. She stood alone in the clearing, breathing slow and steady. Above, the artificial sky opened into light. The test was over. The simulation grid powered down with a soft mechanical sigh. Light from above flooded the terrain in a sterile white glow, washing over the torn vegetation, the scorched ground, the trails of broken branches and predator remnants. The forest, moments ago a living threat, now felt hollow, emptied of purpose. The predators had returned to their hatches. The drones were deactivated mid-step, frozen like sculptures scattered across the landscape. Mira stood in the center of the clearing, her arms relaxed at her sides, her face streaked with dried mud and scratches, but her stance upright and composed. Her hair was pulled back with a strip of plant fiber she had braided during one of her short rests. The stone blade she had fashioned earlier was now dulled, chipped at the edge, but still clenched loosely in her right hand. Above her, a circular hatch spiraled open in the simulated sky, revealing the cold interior of the observation platform. A transport platform began to descend, silent and precise. As it lowered, Mira didn't look up. She didn't have to. She knew she had completed the trial. She had done more than survive. She had outlived the game itself. When the platform touched the ground, she stepped onto it without hesitation. The lift rose with smooth, humming momentum, carrying her above the trees, above the hollowed-out forest, into the mechanical belly of the evaluation deck. The doors hissed open. The observation deck was arranged like an amphitheater, lined with high-ranking instructors, program monitors, species liaisons, and performance analysts. Screens flickered above their heads, showing footage of every quadrant during the trial. Jurak's fall, Siver's silent retreat, the vine pod explosion, Mira's traps. Each image reinforced a single message. She hadn't played the game. She had redefined its parameters. Vrolax stood at the apex of the room, his 6 eyes locked onto her with an intensity that betrayed neither approval nor criticism. His massive hands were folded behind his back. He did not speak immediately. Mira stepped forward, standing before the evaluation dais without being summoned. Her presence was neither bold nor defiant. It was exact. Vrolax finally moved, walking slowly toward the center. He circled her once, studying the injuries, the marks on her uniform, the primitive weapons still in her hand. "Is that your trophy?" he asked. She looked at the stone. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" "That intelligence without intent is just design. But intent, guided by awareness, becomes power." He tilted his head. "You believe what you did was intelligent?" She met his gaze. "No, I believe it was necessary." There was a long pause. Whispers passed among the observation tiers, some in sound, others in subtle energy pulses. No one interrupted. No one dared. Vrolax turned his gaze toward the cadet roster projected behind him. Of the 15 species represented in this cycle, only 3 cadets remained conscious by the end of the trial. Mira had not only survived the longest, but had remained mobile, unassisted and unaided throughout. "What would you call yourself then?" he asked. "Warrior? Strategist? Predator?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "Human." The word lingered in the room like a challenge, like a fact no one wanted to debate aloud. Vrolax turned to the others, raising his voice slightly. "Let it be recorded in the Institute archives that Cadet Mira Lane completed the Apex trial with full behavioral divergence. She refused direct engagement, minimized injury, exploited environmental variables, redirected external threats, and completed the trial with no extraction requests. Recommendation? Reclassification." The silence that followed was not stunned. It was measured. Heavy. The kind that precedes paradigm shifts. One of the analysts, a silken-skinned Nexari female with a data mask across her eyes, leaned forward. "What classification do you suggest?" Vrolax did not blink. "Apex Plus." Gasps erupted, quiet and sharp. The designation had never been used. It did not exist in official records. The highest known level was Apex, based solely on combat resilience and predatory rank. Apex Plus had been theory, a concept considered too unstable to define. The Nexari adjusted her display. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that she did not dominate through strength," he said, his voice deepening. "She dominated through awareness. She did not pursue superiority. She chose to remain underestimated until it served her. That is not instinct. That is evolution, weaponized." The room fell quiet again. Mira remained still. Another voice spoke from the upper platform. "Then what is her species' danger potential?" Mira answered before anyone else could. "Unknown," she said. The voice hesitated. "Explain." She looked upward. "Because you don't know what our limits are. You measure aggression in tooth length and survival in muscle density, but you haven't measured imagination. You haven't measured curiosity, or grief, or obsession. Those are the things that guide us, that drive us." Someone scoffed. "Those sound like weaknesses." "They are," she said, "until we choose to weaponize them." Vrolax stepped beside her. And what would you do with such a classification? Cadet? Nothing, she said. It doesn't change what I am. Verlax gave a slow nod. Indeed. He turned to the others. You asked on the first day what Earth's apex predator was. You all expected a species. You expected a monster. And what you got was a student, quiet and patient, who built no fire, started no war, and walked away from victory without celebration. He pointed toward her. This is not the monster. This is the blueprint. The lights above dimmed, signaling the end of the session. Screens began to fade. The observers returned to their analysis bays, hushed and thoughtful. No more laughter, no more challenges. Mira walked out of the chamber without a word. Her boots echoed softly down the long hallway, past silent instructors, past cadets now watching her with a new kind of silence. Not fear, not admiration. Something deeper, recognition. When she stepped back into her quarters, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, her cheek was bruised, her arms bore scratches and residue from the trial. She looked ordinary. She smiled, because nothing about being the apex predator had to look impressive. It just had to be inevitable, and she had been inevitable from the start.